Hello and welcome to the NBA Minutes to Win It podcast. I'm Big Italy 42. He's Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11. Talking about tonight's 4-game slate. And in case you hadn't noticed the trend by now, I haven't looked weeks in the future because I don't want to be irritated by it. But Monday's been huge slates. Tuesday has been like a Thursday slate. And then we get huge slates Wednesday, small slate, Thursday, big slate Friday. Kind of seems like it's been that way for 2 or 3 weeks now. But as far as 4-game slates go, this one it's like the most average slate you could possibly ask for. Nothing really stands out as awesome plays. I mean, the highest total is 204. All 3 other games are right around 195, so just not a whole lot of excitement. But, I mean, it's still a playable slate. I mean, there's plenty of good options. You can make a cash game lineup. And on a short slate, I mean, there's certainly an edge to be had in your games by not making terrible decisions, which some people certainly will.
Yeah, I think you're being a little bit generous in saying it's an average slate. It's okay. I mean, I'm not thrilled with it, but... You know, I mean, all 4 games are in play.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start talking about each position, of course. As far as injuries go on the point guard end, Goran Dragic is listed as questionable with the swollen hands. Tyler Johnson is already out. So if that's the case, where both guys end up sitting, then Bino Udrih is going to get some run. He's also played 42 minutes over his last 2 games and totaled 15.8 fantasy points on FanDuel. So don't get too excited about him. I mean, I'd still much rather have Jameer Nelson for a little bit more. I don't think Bino is the guy that I'd really play at all unless I had like the best tournament lineup you've ever seen, and then he just fits because he's minimum salary.
Yeah, I don't even think that's the case tonight, just because there are no top plays like guys
that's
over.
True. there's one, I guess 2 guys we'll talk about paying up for, but Emmanuel Mudiay, of course, injury concerns. He's out here once again. So Jameer Nelson, as you know, going to see a ton of minutes. Not a huge volume guy, not a huge usage guy, but just been consistently solid. You're expecting your 20 to 30 fantasy points. So in cash games, it makes sense to just get him. But if you're looking at top options, of course, Kyle Lowry against Dallas, against Deron Williams and company. He's one of those guys that, you know, everyone with a recency bias was pissed off at him the other day because he got thrown out of the game. I mean, he scored more than a fantasy point per minute during the time he was on the court and then got thrown out with 2 technicals. So it's not like the guy wasn't producing. And this, one of the closer spreads, there's not a lot of big spreads, only one really, but should be a competitive game. And just not going to see a whole lot of resistance from that backcourt in Dallas because there's just not a lot of good defenders there at all.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the last time he played Dallas, he dropped 59 DraftKings points on them. So, maybe recency bias will be there if they don't go that deep into looking. But I mean, he's just the obvious play at point guard tonight.
Yeah, and then so I think that your chalk's probably gonna be Lowry, Nelson, and then of course you got Mike Conley against the Sixers, who I kind of like actually. I looked at they're favored by 10 points, which obviously is a big spread. It's at Philly. They've only won 3 games by double digits this year. Played Philly once at home, only won by 8. I think he's a safe bet to still play. You figure at least through 3 quarters because there's just not a lot of offensive weapons that can put up points in a hurry for the Memphis. So got to think that the Sixers can at least stay competitive long enough for him to pay off. And had a good game against them the first time. So, I mean, especially at his price, $6,400 on FanDuel, if he plays 32 to 34 minutes, you got to imagine he's going to be able to hit value there.
Yeah, I really like Conley. I mean, he just sits in that price range where he doesn't really... You're not paying up at all for point guard, but you're still getting a nice 30 fantasy point floor.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one more guy we should mention, I guess, Reggie Jackson. We know he's got the monster upside. Hasn't played since that 4 overtime game. 4 days ago now? It's almost like the NBA knew that game was going 4 overtimes because neither team had played for a couple days after that. But or I guess the Bulls did play the next day, but a couple days off in between. But Reggie Jackson's always a guy you consider for your tournaments. Somehow has played significantly better at home. He's the Drew Brees of the NBA, but he certainly still has upside. So not a guy I'd probably play in cash games, but certainly a guy that I'll consider though.
Yeah, if you're looking to pivot off from, you know, Lowry and the top guys there, Reggie Jackson's the obvious one for tournaments because he does have significant upside, and if Dragic does sit, I mean, you gotta like that matchup even more.
Yeah, that's a good point. Kobe Bryant's on the injury report, moved up to probable as far when we move over to shooting guard here. Tony Allen, the only other real concern. He's day-to-day. He doesn't have a significant role either, but he would certainly take away some minutes from guys like Jeff Green and Courtney Lee. But if you're paying up here, DeMar DeRozan's been on fire recently, been just absolutely locked in. His last 7 games on FanDuel, at least 38 fantasy points in all but one of those, the other one being 33. So he's a guy that's certainly in a good spot. You got Wesley Matthews he's going to have to deal with, who is a good defender, but, I mean, DeRozan's a big guy. He's got size advantage over most players at that position, so got to imagine he'll still be able to get his tonight.
Yeah, I mean, he's been scoring a ton, averaging 27 in the last 6 games and averaging 5 rebounds and 3 assists, so it's nice to see him get some other stats there. And defensively, he's grabbed about almost 2 steals per game in that span.
Yeah, and then your chalk play at shooting guard, going to be Will the Thrill Barton, 6,400 on FanDuel, coming off the best game of his career. He's been consistently good just about all season, seeing low 30s in minutes most games. 32, 10, and 6 against New Orleans. Obviously, they're a terrible defensive team. Also, Danilo Gallinari did leave that game with an injury, so he saw a little bit more usage. But, I mean, he was just on fire either way. Gallinari officially questionable for tonight's game. If he sits, obviously guys like Barton, Kenneth Faried, guys like that are going to get bumps as well. But I think he's certainly a guy that's still in play for cash games no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, even if Gallinari plays, Barton's still going to get his minutes because we've seen it, the last 2 weeks or so. He's been playing right around that 30 mark. Just a safe option right now.
Yeah, another guy who's been surprisingly a safe option. 17, 31, 19, and 18 real points in his last 4 games. Kentavious CaldwellPope. We know he plays monster minutes. He's played 49, 44, and 45 the last 3. Obviously, one of them being a 4 overtime game, but the other ones were not 4 overtime games, obviously. And he plays a ton of minutes, going to be matched up against Dwayne Wade, which makes me like Dwayne Wade less because he is a very good defender. But CaldwellPope, similarly priced to Barton, another one of those guys that makes a nice tournament swerve off of him.
Yeah, I think this game in general, I mean, we really like Drummond in all formats, but I mean, if you want to target some other guys, it's definitely the contrarian route.
Yeah, absolutely. And then real quick, some cheap guys. If Tony Allen continues to be out, Courtney Lee still sees minutes. He's got a ridiculously low floor, though. Not a guy I'm throwing in there, but it's a 4-game slate. You got to differentiate, throw in some cheap guys somewhere. I don't mind him or Terrence Ross. Obviously, Terrence Ross has higher upside, but he's like the DeMar DeRozan Jr., where he's very scoring dependent, though. Yeah,
I mean, I guess for close to bare minimum, he's a decent play if you want to go that route in tournaments, but I mean, we don't need a ton of value tonight.
No, not at all. So I'm not going to dig too deep. Small forward options, as we've seen some nights, we got a ton of small forward guys to pay up for. Tonight, not the case. Gallinari's the most expensive if he goes. You got Marcus Morris right behind there. Morris doesn't have a great matchup either. He's going to be facing off against Luol Deng, and vice versa, of course. So neither one of those guys with a great matchup. So you're looking at value there. Matt Barnes obviously going to be popular again against Philly. James Johnson had a couple big games, is playing a decent amount of minutes as a defender on the wing there. And then I know you got another guy that you're looking at there for your cash games too.
Chandler Parsons, yeah. That minutes limit gone. Expected to play around 30 now. Played 31 the last game and won 16, 6, and 7. So looks like he's back, and you got to expect him to jump in and be a solid part of that offense. And I mean, for that price, I mean, you can't really avoid him right now. Yeah,
definitely a guy that it's going to be one of those ones where a lot of people probably didn't realize that he was off his minutes limit. I mean, I hadn't even hardly realized it either, so it's definitely a good spot for him. He's not going to be this cheap for very long. Last year, he was around a 6K guy most of the time, so take advantage of that while you can. Power forward, not pretty. There's no Blake Griffin or Anthony Davis to pay up for here. You got Chris Bosh against Detroit, who didn't play particularly well against him the first time. He's been very up and down this season, not playing a ton of minutes, right around 30, much like Dwayne Wade. So I think the safest option really is going to be Dirk Nowitzki, who also playing similar minutes to what Bosch is playing, but been much, much more consistent because, well, Dirk actually likes to rebound the basketball consistently.
Yeah, I definitely like Dirk over Bosch tonight. I mean, you save a little bit of cash too, and it looks like it's going to be a higher scoring game, obviously, than Detroit and Miami. So I think Dirk's a pretty safe play.
Yeah, definitely like that. And then Kenneth Faried, even more so if we do see Gallinari sit, but had a monster game against this team the first time they met. Last game, just 24 minutes against New Orleans, but went for 21 and 13. So we know how volatile of a player he is, but for the most part, he's been seeing upper 20s in minutes. Maybe sees a little bit more of a bump against Julius Randle and company tonight as far as minutes go, and there's really no other options you feel safe about that have any sort of upside. So Faried definitely kind of stands out tonight.
Yeah, I like Faried. I just think any way you go about it, you're going to take a little bit of a gamble at power forward because Julius Randle in that same boat where just playing 23 minutes, but he is a great fantasy points per minute guy, so you got to really hope he steps up.
Yeah, I kind of wish Byron Scott would come out and say again today that he wasn't going to play minutes because those are the games that he does play big minutes. But either way, as far as cheap guys, you got Luis Scola, Patrick Patterson, Ursan Ilyasova. You don't love any of those guys, but if you have to go cheap, those are probably the only three guys I'd really be looking at here.
Yeah, Ilyasova was a nice tournament play just because he's been kind of up and down lately, but he has shown pretty good upside.
Yeah, Nerlens Noel did have a big game last time out. Only 2 games removed from missing a couple games to injury. He's another one of those guys, inconsistent minutes, but he can fill up stat sheet in a hurry with steals and blocks, so doesn't necessarily need to put up a big offensive game to pay off a salary that's pretty cheap right now.
Yeah, I like Noel definitely in tournaments, and his defensive game definitely gives him upside.
Yeah. Looking at center, you look at Andre Drummond, you click Andre Drummond's name, whether it's a plus, check mark, whatever it is next to him. You just play Andre Drummond. Had an enormous game against Hassan Whiteside in the Heat the first time out, coming off of a game where he played 54 minutes and 4 overtimes and scored 70 FanDuel points. I mean, the guy, dollar for dollar, has been one of the best plays at any position this year, especially among the elite players. I mean, we're talking him versus DeMarcus Cousins, and I'll take Drummond most nights over Cousins right now.
Yep, I'm with you there. I think Drummond's easily the first guy you click in your lineups and you just build around.
Yeah, completely agree. On the opposite side, Hassan Whiteside has seen a minutes bump recently. Last 4 games, 26, 30, 31, 38, and has been productive. We know when he gets minutes, he is productive. He did have a pretty good game against Drummond the first time. Drummond, as we know, not a great defender, but those 2 guys, kind of the biggest upside plays, I think, kind of by far in this game. I don't really see Bosch or Wade having monster upside here.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going on DraftKings where you can play 2 centers, I kind of actually really like going Whiteside and Drummond because you can really give your ceiling a nice boost there. And I mean, both are just obviously the guys who are going to rebound everything in sight.
Yeah, and then one of your favorite plays, or I guess I don't know your take on him tonight, but you've been on him a lot this season. The double-double machine, Zaza Pachulia. He's fairly priced, so if you're just looking for a cash game option, can't quite afford Drummond, which I don't know why you wouldn't be able to afford Drummond. You should be able to tonight easily. But obviously, guys like Drummond are going to have huge ownership. So if you go with a guy like Zaza, then he's going to have a lower ownership. But outside of that, I mean, you got Marc Gasol and Joel Okafor that you can throw in tournaments, but I'm not a huge fan of anyone else at all.
Yeah, I just think because of tonight's slate, not needing so much value, you can easily just pay up for Drummond. But Pachulia, I mean, always a kind of a safer, cheap option. He's a guy who just suffers around 28 minutes, and he's averaging 14 boards in the last 4 games. So, he's a solid play. Kind of maybe your more expensive Biyombo, I guess you could call him.
Yeah, and Biyombo, I guess, is a play as well. But like we said, you don't really need value. I mean, if you want to throw him in because he'll be lower owned due to the fact that you don't really need all that value, certainly any guy like that is still in play tonight.
Yeah, you got to hope Biyombo goes off for one of his 5 to 7 plus block gains.
Yeah, absolutely. I might just be mixing and matching some big centers in some flex spots tonight. But either way, that'll wrap things up for us here. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out the rest of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.